Welcome, everybody, to the newest installment of the Purple Knights podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris Johnson. And tonight I have with me music reviewer, essayist, and author James Campion, whose new book, Revolution Prince, the Band, the Era, is out now from Backbeat Books, an imprint of Bloomsbury. And it's wherever books are sold. You can get a copy of it right now. And thank you, James, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Yeah, so this should be interesting. The Revolution is my favorite of Prince's bands, and as hardcore Prince fans will tell you, they're not the most technically perfect or you know perfect band in that way, but they hold a special place in my heart just for the fact that they were uh, a family unit, as you explore in your book. They were really a tight knit unit, and they broke down walls that Prince had up around people since his childhood, basically, and he was able to entrust them with being fully himself, and entrust them with creative collaboration and just working together like a family would. There were squabbles and differences of opinion, but they came together and created magic for the years that they were together. And yeah, they're always going to be my favorite band. And a lot of people say that they're they get too much emphasis is placed on the revolution in Prince's career, but I disagree. I think um, they're underrated, if anything else, which is why I was pleased to see that you had undertaken the project of writing a book on the band, and I think it's sort of a long overdue gesture to sort of uh, have a book that focuses on the band. Uh, so many books focus on Prince himself, but not a lot of people give the revolution the props that they deserve. There's great books by uh, Pierre Nilsson, which was Dance Music Sex Romance, which covered the first decade of his career. And there's the great Studio Sessions series by Dwayne Tudall, a friend of the podcast. I've had him on twice. His books are amazing, but there hasn't really been a deep dive into the dynamics and inner workings of the Revolution as a band. So, my first question to you, James, is um, about the origin of the project. I mean, how did this come about, and how did you um, go about like researching? Did you watch performances? Did you read other sources? Did you interview the Revolution band members? How did that all come together?
Well, that was a nice review, and I feel the same way as you. I was in my 20s in the 80s and playing in bands, and that was a heady time for all of us when Prince was just such an experimentalist and exploration master as far as music is concerned and fashion and social commentary. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, so a couple of things. You mentioned Dwayne. Dwayne Tudall was a huge help. His work, his research, his interviews, he shared a lot of information with me. He was very helpful in some of the early drafts of the book, keeping me on measure. I know a friend of a podcast as well, Andrea Svensson, who gave me a
Yep.
great tour of Prince's Minneapolis back in the summer of 2023. Andrea looked over some of my final drafts to make sure, I got everything right. And she
Wow.
kept me in contact with a lot of the guys and women in the revolution, but I was going to interview them and make it really all about them. And then I decided, well, it was really Rob Sheffield who wrote the foreword to the book from Rolling Stone magazine, a wonderful writer and a great friend who really counseled me in writing the book I wanted to write, and then getting the people in the revolution to comment afterwards. Well, that worked in my favor because some of them were reticent to talk at the time. And Bobby Z smartly said to me, or said through Andrea, why doesn't he just take all the interviews we did during the times? I would love to see, that reflection of that in the book.
Sure,
So I did do
sure.
that. And she told me Bobby's reading the book now and he seems to like it so far. So I'm happy. And I wanted it to be a tribute, as you said, Chris, to the band and the period. But I also didn't want it to be everybody's disparate stories. So I tried to mold the story the way a novelist would with the
Right.
information I was given. And I spent a lot of time in the Minneapolis archives and I went through old magazine articles. And, just to finish up, I watched all the old print shows, that were on the cameras that they would capture inside some of these clubs when they toured Dirty Mind and Controversy, some of the larger venue shows that were recorded for 1999, and of course, the Purple Rain tour. So, and
Yeah.
I went back into all the archives and listened to all the stuff that I loved when I was younger, like you, all the
Oh,
B-sides and the
wow.
extra stuff, and I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure all of that was in the book for people who are not like you and me, who know all the little ins and outs. I wanted this book. I hope Prince fans read it and love it. But I really want the younger people, people who are not around at that time. They need to realize how important, how impressionable and influential, how huge Prince was, not only as a pop star and as a cultural icon, but as
Oh,
someone who
yeah.
changed the face of music. And I think that that's forgotten in many ways now among these new generations, and I don't want that to pass. And I think the revolution does deserve a great deal of credit for that period.
Yeah, I mean the revolution years were pretty much the zenith of Prince's career, and a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but hardcore fans tend to gloss over that, because if anything gets really, really popular, then people sort of tend to rebuff it, and say they're
Sure.
not, they get tired of it. But for me, the revolution is peak Prince. Not to say that his other bands didn't bring things out in him, but the Revolution, especially, and you talk about this in your book, how they were able to, uh, like I say, break down his walls, his barriers that he had personally from growing up, and the trauma of growing up, how he did. The Revolution was able to break down his walls and sort of penetrate um, that rough exterior that the Prince had built up. Um, so, as far as the timing of this goes, um, what made you want to write a Revolution book right now? I mean, in this day and age, I mean, we all know it's last year was the 40th anniversary of Purple Rain. This year is the 40th anniversary of Around the World in a Day, two seminal Prince albums that were done with heavy input from the Revolution. Was there some other impetus that um, that inspired you to write this book at this time? Because you've written many books. You wrote a book on one of my favorite songs by the Beatles, um, "Hey Jude," and you've written books on Kiss and Warren Zevon. What inspired you to write the book on the Revolution now?
Great question. Unlike my friend Peter Ames Carlin, who just has a new book out, which is brilliant, on the making of Born to Run, Peter was a very big help in my Hey Jude book. He wrote a quintessential biography about Paul McCartney. But he and I were talking recently, and he really busted it to get his book out on Born to Run because it was the 50th anniversary this past August to get it out by that point.
Yeah.
I never work on my books that way. I'm inspired mainly out of a few things. For Warren Zevon, it was like nobody really knows about Warren Zevon. I think more people should know about him, so I'm going to write some stuff about him. In the case of Kiss, I wrote about the album Destroyer because I always felt that that was one of the great rock albums of the 1970s, and a lot of my colleagues always used to look over it, and I thought that needed to have some spotlight. But it really was what I was saying before, Chris. There's a whole generation of people who know Prince. Pockets of Prince. Yeah, I know that one song. You wouldn't believe it. People like you and me and fans maybe listening to this podcast would not believe it. But I talk to a lot of young kids. I work with a lot of them, the young writers. I do tours of the East Village for the history of 70s punk. And these young kids, they don't know about the Clash or Blondie or Talking Heads or the
Oh wow.
Ramones the way
Yeah.
I do. And Prince is starting to get into that category. And as you said, even though I absolutely adore other parts of Prince's career, and I went to see him play like a dozen times over the years in the 80s and 90s and aughts, but this period was so seminal, as I said before, so impactful. He was such a huge star. And not only was he a star, but he was influential in the way he expanded the musical paradigm and the way we think about music, just like the Beatles did in the 1960s. So I think that that deserved to have a voice. And I was also inspired by Andrea's wonderful podcast that she did for the Prince Estate, in which she talked about the
Yes.
making of Sign of the Times and how much Wendy and Lisa and Matt Fink and everybody was involved in that record. And then eventually, when he broke up the Revolution, Prince, he put that record out with just his own stuff, and I just love that record. And they did a lot of work on that. So then I started doing more research, Chris, and I realized they did a lot of work on everything, a lot of stuff. We just think of Prince as this
Yeah.
solitary entity, and he is to a certain extent, but he really relied on Andre, not just the people in the Revolution, Andre and Dez, and even Gail Chapman before, and of course Wendy and Lisa and the rest of the band. So it was fascinating to go back and see how much they really contributed, and I thought they needed that story told, and I told it the best I could.
Well, yeah, for sure. It's a great book, and I would argue that band members, the configuration of the band with Andre and Dez and Gail was sort of the proto revolution. So
Yeah.
it all links together in an interesting way. But yeah, and I don't really want to spoil the book. The point of this podcast is for people to um, get interested in the book and read it for themselves. So I don't want to really spoil anything. But could you talk a little bit about the uh, the roles that the members had in the band? Um, how they each filled a specific role, or maybe um, several roles at one one time in the band to sort of uplift and give root to Prince's vision.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Yeah, they were
Okay.
they reflected that's the key to the book for me. You mentioned it before. I used this term. The band is family, family is the band. They absorbed his ideas, they protected his ideas, they reflected his ideas in the way they dressed, in the way they acted, their attitudes on stage. It was a true army. It was a true gang for him. He was so shy as a kid and as a young man. And he remained shy the rest of his career, never sang in the studio in front of anyone. And he really was one of the most magnificent performers of the 1980s and beyond. But he needed to get on that stage. And I give him all the credit in the world for going on American Bandstand and going in on all those TV shows that he went on, the Midnight Special and everywhere. And he always had the band with him. He didn't do a solo with backing musicians like Madonna or with or Michael Jackson. It was always him and the band. He gave them full props. He did videos with the band. He did a film with the band, and the band was a huge centerpiece of that film, Purple Rain. So I give him props for that. But it wasn't just like he was doing them a favor. They were very much, even though he was always the leader and he was always the idea, and it was his contract with Warner Brothers. They were his songs and everything. But there was a great symbiosis, Chris, between those beautiful musicians and Prince. And as you said,
Yeah.
they were all young people, 18, 19, 20, just like him, and they
Yep.
all got behind him. And it's such a heartwarming story of great camaraderie of young people and Prince becoming Prince. He invented what we love about Prince during those years, and they helped him do that.
Yeah. And as I read the book, I couldn't help but make the connection that if I were to personify the revolution, like say the revolution as a person, I would say that the revolution would be Prince's first true love, in the sense that yeah,
Wow.
they
Yeah.
broke up and parted ways, and there were bands and groups and people after them, but the revolution were Prince's first one true love, and they're always going to be a part of his cultural the cultural zeitgeist, and certainly a part of Prince's creative soul. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, Chris, thank you for reading the book, and you got out of it exactly what I was hoping. And as someone like yourself who has dedicated this podcast and you're a huge fan, and I've listened to some of these podcasts, and you know way more than I do, my friend. For you to be able to get that out of it, yes, I think the as you said earlier, Prince's difficult childhood, he kind of had trust issues, certainly very myopic, very driven and focused, which made him a great composer and a wonderful artist. But he was difficult to get through, but he could get through with the music. Each time I went and wrote different passages in the book to describe the music, I always would go back to this is how Prince communicated. This is how anything you want to know about Prince, you can find in those songs. They may be flowery and full of metaphor and sexual innuendo, well, more than innuendo, or anything he's pointing at, but
Yes.
it's a lot of him in there, you know, and I think that they did reflect a lot of that. And I think it really made, I know after reading that book, it made a world of difference. I think one of the great stories that, you know, many Prince fans know, but I really enjoyed writing about and researching was the terrible show that they did in front of the Rolling Stones in which they were booed and they were throwing things at them. And when Prince went home, that could have been it. That could have been it, Chris. That could have
Right.
been it. But
Right.
who
Right.
calls him up? Nobody can get him back. You know, the promoters and Mick Jagger, nobody could get him back on that stage. But Des Dickerson called him, and he kept using the word we. We can't let it go down like this. We can't let them stop us. We have to make the next step. And I think Prince resonated greatly with that. He came
Yeah.
back and it changed the way he viewed the music business after that. After
Oh
they
yeah.
played that second show, he told them, "We're never going to open for anyone again. We're going to forge our own way." And they never did.
Yeah, and I mean you write so eloquently about that situation, that gig, and other, you know, pivotal performances too in the Revolution era. And selfishly for me, the one that I wanted to bring up with you on this podcast and get your impressions of is August 3rd, 1983 at First Avenue, the benefit for Minnesota Dance Theater. That's got to be my best guilty pleasure and my favorite Revolution gig of all time. Not just for the fact that it's the debut of the Revolution as a unit and the debut of Wendy Melvoin on on rhythm guitar, but just the set list, and then of course culminating with, it wasn't the final song, but I mean it was the culmination of everything going on. I'm referring to the full unedited First Avenue performance of Purple Rain, which was edited down for the album version. That whole First Avenue gig, August 3rd, 1983. I always say if I had a time machine, that would be the first place I would go. The first day in the first year that I would visit would be August 3rd, 1983. I just wanted to get your impressions, your thoughts of that gig. Did you watch it as part of your research, your deep dive for the book, and what did you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words about my writing. That means a lot.
Yeah,
Yes, I mean that's available. You can watch it on YouTube. It was again an internal camera that was filmed that First Avenue used to film the acts on the stage. So it's really well done. You're kind of like a fly on the wall. And I got to, thanks to Andrea and the people over at First Avenue, I got to tour First Avenue. I got to see a show there the night before. I saw the Eels play there, and then the next day I got a full tour of the backstage area and the side, and I got to stand on the balcony, and I got a real feel for what that room is like. And so to watch that that show and how incredibly imperative. I mean, Prince was walking around backstage, according to Bobby Z, saying, "We're going to make history tonight. We're making history." I mean, it's like he knew it. He painted everything out. He had all the Warner Brothers people there. He had he had the director of Purple Rain there, and he showed them on that stage how this movie was going to go. The last 45 minutes of Purple Rain, the film, is all music performances from First Avenue
Yep.
stage, the time and the revolution. And he did it that night. He performed those songs that no one had ever heard for. No one had ever heard "Let's Go Crazy" before. No one had ever heard "Computer Blue" before. No one had ever heard "Purple Rain" before, or
Yeah.
the other songs he recorded, "I Would Die for You" and "Baby I'm a Star." And it's just, it was so beautiful. And the thing that moves me the most, Chris, and it was so much fun writing. I wrote all the descriptions of the shows in the first person, so I wanted to make people feel like they were there. Is
Yes.
when I watched it, when I watched it, that one part he plays, da-na, 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 da, da-na, da, he's making that up on the spot, and you're
Yes.
watching him do it. It's so cool. It's
Yes.
like, it's so great. So it was so moving to see this man present this music completely naked with these people. And as you said, at 19 years old, this is the first time Wendy Melvoin ever played a professional gig. It's
Yes.
incredible, this story.
Yes.
So it was
Yeah.
so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's giving me chills just thinking about it. I mean, it's awesome. And yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way you write in first person, it really is immersive. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Um, um, oh, I was gonna talk about Prince's other bands and how the Revolution stacks up. I mean, what do you think in terms of in terms of um I don't want to say all of Prince's creative output because that's broad
Yeah.
a broad spectrum to cover, but I mean, where do you think the Revolution ranks personally for you in the pantheon of Prince's backup groups? And I'm thinking, as I'm asking this, I'm thinking of the quote that you have in the book from Bobby Z about how the Revolution was a band of ideas, and it was the band that he was. It was the last band that he was in as a member, as opposed to it being Prince plus a backing band. Um, do you find that statement accurate, or what do you think? How do you think the Revolution ranks in terms of Prince's bands that he collaborated with and that he was inspired by? And because I know in his later career he was really inspired by the women in Third Eye Girl,
Yeah.
and that sort of reinvigorated his creative spark, so to speak. But where do you think the Revolution um, sort of slots in on that scale of um, just inspiration and creativity and creative spark?
Well, since I did all this research, and I spent all this time, 2 years with the revolution and all those periods, it's hard for me to argue that they are eclipsed by anybody in the collaboration aspect. Remember, Prince was 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. He was learning how to be a performer. He was learning how to fail. He was learning how to utilize the studio as a palette. He was learning how to be a collaborator. He was learning how to just be an adult. And he did all those things with these people. That great story of the Rebels where he takes them out to Colorado and they all write their own music.
Yeah,
He would never do that again. All the different things we talk about, the doing the films. And I love the MPG period. I really dug those shows. My favorite live shows that he ever did. I saw one Revolution show. I would describe it in the book, and I talk about it in the first person because I was there. Was the last show they ever did in America together, the August 3rd, 1986 show at Madison Square Garden for the parade tour,
oh
or what he
yep,
called the hit and run tour. So I was there for that.
yep,
But after that, I saw my favorite, probably, I saw, the nude shows and I saw all those shows over the years. But my favorite tour was the Love Sexy tour, in the round, with Levi Caesar on bass, Miko Weaver on guitar. Matt Fink was still in the band on keyboards. He had Sheila E., of course, on drums. That was Kat's first American tour. I know she was on the Sign of the Times tour, but he only did that in Europe. So,
right,
for me, I love them all. I think they all add something to his incredible career, but it's tough to ask me that because I spent so much time with them. But I think just intellectually, you would have to say the Revolution ranks up there because, again, he learned everything we know about Prince in their company, in their
Right, right,
evolution. It's hard to be the second, it's like a first kiss, your first car, your first beer, your first rock song you've heard. You know what I mean?
right, right,
It's hard to
right.
replace those first things. And he was so
Yeah,
naive and he was learning so many things about jazz and classical music from Lisa Coleman and learning about all these different things that he ended up using as a sponge later on in his career with all these amazing musicians in the MPG and some of those touring bands later on. So they're all great in their own way. But yeah, you have to tip your cap to the pre-revolution specifically, even before Wendy got there and before
yep,
Brown Mark got there. And
yep.
then, that whole period is a gestation period. He was evolving so quickly.
Right, right, right. And I think right there, James, I think you hit the nail on the head, at least partially, to
Right.
arrive at a partial explanation of why the revolution is my personal favorite. I mean, they encapsulated all of what was quintessentially Prince was formed and then encapsulated by his work with the revolution. And I mean, look at an album like Sign of the Times, which was released after the revolution's formal breakup, but still, you look at that material, and it could be argued that in the mixing, Prince maybe drowned them out a little bit. But if you look at the history of the recording of that album, that could arguably be called a revolution album because the revolution had so much input and so much presence, especially on earlier versions of the songs that would later make up Sign of the Times. Um, we had all those proto albums like Camille and Dream Factory and all that, and all the Revolution worked on all of that. So it really goes to show that they were really an integral part of Prince's DNA, and I think your book does justice to that fact. And like I say, gives the revolution their flowers in a way that we haven't seen before. So I really appreciate it for that fact, and I really appreciate where it sits in the in the Prince the all the text written about Prince. I like where it sits in that milieu, in that area. So I appreciate your book. Um,
Thank you.
and finally, to wrap things up, I don't want to keep you too long, but I customarily ask my guests, where can we find you on online and on social media?
Well, you can find me at jamescampion.com. And by the way, I do sell signed copies of the book. If you want a signed copy for yourself or a friend, or you have a Prince fan in your family, or a boyfriend or girlfriend, people have been asking me. It's been so much fun, Chris. They've been asking me to put Prince lyrics in there and
Hmm.
little connections that people have to Prince, and it's been one of the great joys. So I'd be love to do that if you're interested. But as you said before, you can find the book anywhere, Amazon, obviously Barnes and Noble. I always tell people, try to prompt people to go to independent bookstores, support your independent bookstores in your
Yes,
towns if you can. Um,
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm at jamescampion.com on Instagram, Fear No Art on X, and I have two Facebook pages, one for the Revolution and one as James Bartolomeo, which is my middle name, Campion, on Facebook, and you can find all my work on there, my essays, and other information on my books, just like you can on my website. So thank you for allowing me to say this, Chris. And I just wanted to ask you before you let me go, if you got a minute, I would love to
Sure.
know. I've not if I'm sorry for my ignorance if I've missed this, but I would love to know from this era, what is your favorite song or maybe record and why?
Well, my favorite song. and I always feel a little reticent to say this because in hardcore Prince fan circles, if you say the most popular song to the masses is your favorite song, and they kind of discredit you and they say you're not a real hardcore fan. But I
Sure.
gotta say, for very personal reasons, um, mainly uh, dealing with great physical pain and great depression as a pre-adolescent, I I gravitated again towards the song "Purple Rain" because I've been a fan since age 3, and I'm a Dirty Mind baby. I was born in 1980, and I've been a fan since Little Red Corvette was on the radio. So, but I really connected with Purple Rain, the song, later on down the line when I was 12 years old because I had a spiritual epiphany associated with it, and it really helped me reframe my thoughts as far as my notions of spirituality and the interconnectedness of people and the power of music to uh, uplift and enlighten spiritually. And so, Purple Rain, the song, has a very special place in my heart. And I still get emotional during the guitar solo when it really hits that soaring
Yeah.
those soaring high notes, and they're just screaming into the ether. It really, to me, not to get too religious because I don't know your relationship with faith or anything like that, James. But to me, I can feel the power of God in that guitar solo, and the the love of God, the forgiveness of God, the protection of God. I can feel it all in that guitar solo, and every time I listen to it, especially in a live setting, when the Revolution have gotten together after Prince's passing and done concerts and shows, in the posthumous era now that we now live in for nearly a decade now. Um, every time I've heard it live, I get choked up because it takes me back to that moment in my life where I was feeling, the the power of a higher power, a higher spirit, and I felt a higher calling in that moment. And the podcast is just a small part of me uh, paying paying back what Prince gave me, not only in that moment, but all through my childhood and growing up, literally with his music as the soundtrack to my life. Um, this podcast is a testament to what Prince's music has done for me and what his message has done for me, and the Revolution were a big part of that message as well. So I I I'm acquaintances with Bobby Z and his lovely wife Vicky, and I'm so grateful for their kind words and their friendship over the years. And I met Wendy and Lisa, and that was one of the greatest moments of my life. I met them in February 2009 at First Avenue, and that was probably the second greatest moment of my life next to meeting Prince. But that's for our next podcast, James. If you want to hear that story, but
Yeah.
yeah, Wendy and Lisa. The only Revolution member that I haven't met in person so far is Brown Mark. So I'm looking to make that happen. But um,
Great.
yeah, and one of my bucket list goals is to have at least some or possibly all of the Revolution as guests on the podcast. That's the major goal as of now because I've had Susan Rogers, who was the album engineer
Sure.
for Purple Rain and other Revolution material. I've had her on the podcast. I've had Jill Jones, the backup singer,
Hmm.
and she played the waitress in the Purple Rain film. I've
Hmm.
had her on the podcast, so I've been blessed to have many important purple luminaries on the podcast. But if I could get the Revolution on here, um, it would be pretty much a dream come true. But uh, reading this book, it really excited me and took me back to my childhood, discovering Prince, discovering the Revolution, and it's a really worthwhile read. So I implore all of the watchers on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on Spotify, I implore all of you to go out there and get uh, Revolution, Prince, the Band, the Era by James Campion. Uh, it's in bookstores everywhere now, wherever you get your books. And there's even an audio book, isn't there, James?
Yes, it's a wonderful read. I forget the gentleman's name, but I just finished listening to it, and it's a really wonderful. The guy did a fantastic job. Yeah, and it's also available in the ebook. And before you let me go, Chris, I just want to say what you just told me is the reason why I write about music.
Yeah,
That's what. So you described exactly why I do it and what motivates me every day to get up and write about it. And then, secondly, the one thing I forgot to mention that was also an impetus, to use the current term you just rightly used, the impetus for me writing this book is that wonderful story about how all five of those people needed to be with each other
yep,
when Prince died. They
yep,
had to be with each other. They could not, they immediately thought of each other and then they got together and then they toured. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh, this seems kind of gratuitous. They're out there touring after he died, cashing in. But then when I did the
right,
research and I realized they were healing themselves and they were healing fans such as
right,
yourself
right.
who needed that. And it's just so heartwarming. And I said, there has to be a story behind this. It can't just be about the music business. It can't be about the money or the fame or the association with Prince. Is a deeper, you call it spiritual, whatever you want to say, there's a deeper story here. And I hope, and it sounds like I did, Chris, for you, capture that. And that's what I
Oh
wanted to do. So
yes, yes.
it is, thank you. It's been an honor to be on this show so you can tell me these things because it means the world to me that readers get that out of it. Because when you spend 2 years in isolation by yourself working on something like this,
Yeah, yeah.
get that is a great gift. So thank you, my friend, and thank you for having me on the show.
Well,
Really.
thank you for giving me some of your time tonight, and I'm excited because I'm an NFL fan, and the Minnesota Vikings, my team, are playing tonight on Monday Night Football.
Okay.
So, and I know Prince was a fan as well.
It was, yeah.
So I'm excited to see them tonight. But thank you so much for generously giving me your time and your attention, and I appreciate it. And I definitely will take you up on that offer of an autographed inscribed book because I have a collection of those actually, and I really love um, getting personalized copies from authors. I love that. So
My pleasure.
I would definitely enjoy that. So
Yeah.
thank you
Yes.
for that.
Of course. Email my assistant Jessica and give her my your address, and I'll get that out to you this week.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much. And yeah, I was gonna say something else, but it slipped my mind now.
I'm
But
sorry.
uh,
I'm sorry.
uh,
Yes, I will get you a signed copy. I wanted to make sure you knew that. So yeah.
yeah, but thank you so much again for your time, and I'm flattered that you've actually watched several episodes of the podcast. That's very fulfilling for me to hear. Um, I'm actually going on a hiatus, trying to figure out how I want to move forward and what I want to do with the platform and the voice that I have here in the Prince world, the purple singularity, as my friend Richard Cole, who has the Amari Music Podcast on YouTube. He calls it the purple singularity. I call it the purple world. But yeah, I'm trying to figure all that out. But uh, I wanted to do this interview because I knew it was important, and I wanted to get your book out there and let people know that they should check it out because it's definitely worthwhile. So thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
this is Chris Johnson for myself and James Campion. I say we'll see you next time, and peace and be wild, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.